Nobody expected the Philippines' most unassuming star to end a champion's reign on center court in front of the whole tennis world. Birmingham was the warning, Berlin was the proof. Wimbledon was where Alex Eala stopped being a surprise and started being a threat. She didn't just beat a top player, she beat the defending champion on the biggest stage in the sport, in a tiebreak that will be replayed for years. 6 years of doubt, one Czech curse, and a career full of near misses, all of it broken in a single breathless month. And now, with a place in the Wimbledon quarterfinals on the line, the next name on her list is waiting just across the net. This is the story of how a wild card became the most talked about player left in the draw.
It sounds really beautiful, of course. All those names that you've mentioned are tennis greats, and I am so honored to be lifting this trophy today, but lifting this trophy does not mean that I will be among the greats yet, so I'm motivated to keep working, and I'm grateful for the part that this trophy has played in my journey. I'd also like to thank Nicola for this kind words, and of course congratulate you for an amazing week. And it's one of those days I wish we could both win, and of course this match was incredible. I think it was anyone's game, so congratulations to your team. And yeah, I'll see you next week or in the week after. I'd also like to thank my coach right there. And my team, and of course my family who's watching from home now. I love you guys.
To understand what Alex Eala just did, you have to understand what she was fighting against long before she ever stepped onto center court. For years, she carried a reputation that was equal parts admiration and frustration. Fans called her a giant slayer. Insiders called her a talent trapped just outside the top tier. Because for every statement win over an elite name, there seemed to be a quieter story running underneath it, a pattern of near misses, of tantalizing runs that stopped just short of history. There was one storyline in particular that had quietly followed her for 6 years, like a shadow she couldn't outrun.
Ooh, statement of intent. Behind is going to be used a lot today, you suspect. She loves that serve. Yeah, a little heavy-handed with the volley, and Eala said thank you. It was a feast of flat ball striking that point.
By 2026, the losses weren't just numbers anymore. They had become a narrative, one that trailed her from tournament to tournament, whispered about by commentators every time a Czech name appeared on her side of the draw. This year alone, 3 Czech players had already beaten her, at the Qatar Open, at Indian Wells, and at the Miami Open, where she suffered a humbling straight sets defeat in the round of 16. It wasn't just losing.
I don't know how to describe it. I mean, I'm into the second week of a slam, and it's amazing for me. Iga is a phenomenal player and a really nice person, so I'm really grateful to be able to share center court with her at Wimbledon nonetheless. Yeah, I'm really emotional, and maybe for someone like Iga, who has won so many slams, or maybe someone like Serena or Venus, this achievement may seem small, but for someone who grew up in the Philippines and you know, I went to train with my brother and my grandfather every day after school with my ruffled socks and my light-up shoes and chubby cheeks. So To her, this is everything.
So when Alex Eala arrived at the Birmingham Open in early June, there was no fanfare, no pressure, no expectation. She had walked off these same courts a year earlier after a first-round exit, arriving this time without any momentum behind her. She was simply the top seed at a WTA 125 event, a talented player looking for form, not a storyline in the making. But sometimes the quietest moments before a storm are the ones that matter most. Because what was about to happen in Birmingham wasn't just going to be a title, it was going to be the first domino in a run that would eventually put her name on center court, across the net from a defending Wimbledon champion. Nobody in that stadium in Birmingham had any idea what they were witnessing the beginning of, and that's often how the biggest stories in sports start, not with a bang, but with a quiet, determined player simply trying to find her footing again. Because if there's one thing tennis has taught us again and again, it's this: the players who suffer the longest droughts are often the ones building toward the loudest breakthroughs, and Alex Eala's breakthrough was closer than anyone could have guessed. The Birmingham Open Final should have been unremarkable on paper. A WTA 125 event, a talented but unproven finalist in Nicola Bartunkova, the tournament's 5th seed, playing in her first ever grass court tournament. But paper doesn't account for 6 years of history, and it doesn't account for what happens when a player finally decides enough is enough. From the very first game, the ghosts were there. Bartunkova, yet another Czech name on the other side of the net, took the opening set 7-5 after a late break, then immediately struck again in the second set to grab an early lead. For a moment, it looked like the pattern was about to repeat itself. Another Czech opponent, another loss, another chapter in a curse that refused to die. But something was different this time. Eala broke back immediately. Then she began to take control of the baseline rallies, dictating points with heavier depth and sharper angles than Bartunkova could handle. She gradually took control, breaking back and starting to dictate the match with sharper, heavier shot-making. The match stretched on through numerous rain delays, testing both players' patience as much as their game. And in the final game, the moment that would define the entire match, Eala found herself facing 3 breakpoints, 3 chances for Bartunkova to level things and seize the momentum right back. She saved every single one of them. Eala saved 3 breakpoints before sealing the win in a punishing 2 hours and 38 minutes, finally closing out a 57-63, 7-5 victory. And when the final ball landed, it wasn't just a trophy she was lifting, it was 6 years of frustration, 6 years of a narrative she never asked for, finally put to rest. Her words afterward carried the weight of that moment. "I am so honored to be lifting this trophy today," she said, her voice steady but clearly emotional. "Lifting this trophy does not mean that I will be among the greats yet, so I'm motivated to keep working, and I'm grateful for the part that this trophy has played in my journey." It was a humble statement from a player who had just done something that had eluded her for 6 straight years. But underneath the humility, there was steel. She talked about the tightest moments in that final game, saying simply, "It's one of those days where a little bit of luck and intention was what got me through." What made the moment even sweeter was the company she suddenly found herself in. Her name now sat alongside legends like Billie Jean King, Martina Navratilova, Maria Sharapova, and Petra Kvitova on the list of Birmingham champions. Though true to her character, she brushed off the comparison almost immediately, insisting she still had work to do to belong among names like that. But here's the thing about breaking a 6-year curse. It doesn't just end a losing streak. It changes something inside a player. It proves, in the most concrete way possible, that the story she had been told about herself, the player who couldn't get past a certain type of opponent, who couldn't finish the biggest matches, wasn't actually true. It was just a chapter, and chapters end. Nobody watching that match in Birmingham could have predicted what came next. A wild card entry into a much bigger tournament, a collision course with 2 of the best players in the world. Because Birmingham wasn't the ceiling for Alex Eala's season, it was the floor, and she was just getting started. If Birmingham was the spark, Berlin was the explosion. Eala arrived at the Vanda Pharmaceuticals Berlin Tennis Open as a wildcard, a status that, on paper, suggests a player fighting just to survive a tournament, not one destined to make headlines. But wildcards have a strange power in tennis. They carry no seeding, no pressure of expectation, and sometimes that freedom becomes a weapon. The tennis world's attention snapped toward her almost overnight. She claimed one of the biggest upsets of her career against world number 2 Elena Rybakina in the round of 16, a result that alone would have been the headline of most players' entire season. But Eala wasn't finished. Less than 24 hours later, she walked back onto the grass courts of the Steffi Graf Stadium and did it again. This time, the opponent was Elena Svitolina, the former world number 3 and a player with far more Grand Slam pedigree and tournament experience than Eala. It didn't matter. Eala defeated Svitolina 6-3, 6-4 to book a place in her first ever WTA 500 semifinal, storming to an early lead and refusing to let the veteran claw her way back into control. It marked her 6th career victory against a top 10 opponent, and remarkably, the first time she had strung together consecutive wins against players of that caliber since her legendary run at the 2025 Miami Open, a tournament where she had beaten both Madison Keys and Iga Świątek back-to-back. Suddenly, this wasn't a wild card quietly making the numbers. This was a genuine contender. She had further enhanced her reputation as a giant slayer, adding 2 top 10 players to her list of victims on the WTA Tour in the span of a single weekend. Social media buzzed. Fans back in the Philippines flooded timelines with flags and celebration posts. Tennis analysts who had barely mentioned her name a month earlier were now dissecting her serve, her return game, her newfound confidence on grass. And that confidence had a source. Eala had compiled an outstanding record on grass this season, a surface that seemed to fit her flat, clean ball striking better than any other. The low bounce, the pace, the need for precision over raw power, it all played directly into her strengths. What had once been considered her weakest surface was suddenly becoming her launching pad. The semifinal awaiting her was against Linda Noskova, one of the very Czech players who had haunted her for 6 years, the same player who had beaten her just months earlier at Indian Wells in brutal fashion, 6-2, 6-0. Eala spoke about the challenge ahead with clear-eyed respect rather than fear. She's a big hitter and she's young, but she has a lot of experience and she's very powerful, Eala said of her upcoming opponent. It was a strange, almost poetic collision of storylines, the player who had just broken her Czech curse in Birmingham, now facing yet another Czech opponent, this time with a WTA 500 final on the line, and the eyes of the tennis world watching every point. Whatever happened next, one thing was already certain. Alex Eala was no longer a surprise. She had become someone every player in that draw needed to worry about. Every great sports story needs a moment where the hero stumbles, not because the story demands tragedy, but because real triumph only means something when it comes with real risk. For Alex Eala, that moment arrived in the Berlin semifinal against Linda Noskova. The match started poorly, and it started fast. Noskova dealt Eala a 6-2, 6-4 semifinal loss in a contest delayed by rain and complicated by dropping temperatures. The Czech star jumped ahead early, breaking Eala twice in the opening set and racing to a 5-2 lead before closing it out with authority. It was a stark, uncomfortable reminder of exactly the kind of result that had defined years of Eala's career. Dominant, then suddenly not. But this time, there was resistance. Eala reeled off 3 consecutive games, highlighted by a crucial break, to briefly turn the match around and even the score in the second set. For a few tense games, it looked like she might complete an improbable comeback against the player who now held a perfect 2-0 record against her. Fans who had spent the previous week celebrating her giant-slaying run held their breath, daring to believe the fairy tale could continue one more round. It didn't. Noskova responded with 3 straight games of her own, sealing her place in the final and ending Eala's remarkable run at the Final Four. The numbers told a clear story about where the match had been lost. Noskova finished with a commanding 17-8 edge in return points won, a stark contrast to the dominance Eala had shown on return against Rybakina and Svitolina just days earlier. Was this a setback? A reality check? For a player who had just spent 2 straight matches slaying giants, losing to Noskova, again, could have been read as proof that the ceiling was still there, still limiting her when the stakes rose highest. The pattern that had haunted her for 6 years seemed to whisper its way back into the conversation. Could she really compete with the very best when a title, not just a scalp, was on the line? But context matters here, and context tells a different story. This wasn't a collapse. This was a wildcard entry with 0 seeding and 0 expectation, reaching her first ever WTA 500 semifinal by beating 2 top 10 players in a row. She earned 195 WTA ranking points and prize money for her run, highlighted by statement wins over Rybakina and Svitolina just days earlier. Losing to a player she'd never beaten on a surface still relatively new to her, in a match complicated by rain delays and shifting conditions, that's not failure. That's the cost of pushing further than anyone expected. Still, in the immediate aftermath, there were questions. Commentators speculated about whether her breakthrough was a genuine turning point or simply a hot streak that had reached its natural ceiling. Fans debated whether the Czech curse had ever truly been broken or whether Noskova had simply proven that certain opponents would always have her number. It was the kind of debate that follows every breakout run in sports, the search for the limit, the need to know whether this was the beginning of something lasting or the peak of something temporary. Eala herself offered no excuses, no frustration, no sign of a player rattled by the defeat. She simply turned her attention to her next tournament, continuing her preparations for Wimbledon. If there was doubt swirling around her after Berlin, she wasn't going to let it linger. She was already looking toward the biggest stage of all. And then came Wimbledon, the tournament that would answer every lingering question at once. Eala walked into the championships as the 29th seed, a distinction that carried historic weight all on its own. She became the first Filipino player ever seeded at a Grand Slam. But history was only just beginning to be written. She fought through her opening rounds with the same relentless energy that had defined her entire season, and days before her biggest test, she had already made a different kind of history, becoming the first player from the Philippines in the Open era to reach the 3rd round of a major, rallying from a set down against Maya Joint, the very player who had eliminated Serena Williams from the tournament days earlier. That set up the collision everyone had circled on their calendars the moment the draw was made. Alex Eala against defending champion Iga Świątek, the number 3 seed, on center court. It was a rematch of a rivalry with real history behind it. Eala had already beaten Świątek once before as a 19-year-old wildcard ranked outside the top 100 at the 2025 Miami Open, though Świątek had since evened the score with a win at Madrid. This match would decide the tiebreaker in their head-to-head, and far more than that. The opening set was a war. It spanned 84 minutes and was arguably the finest set of the entire championships up to that point. Eala fell behind a break early, clawed her way back, held a set point on her own serve, couldn't convert it, and watched Świątek level things right back up. It all came down to a tiebreaker that felt less like tennis and more like a duel. Eala surged to a 5-2 lead in the breaker, only for Świątek to storm back with 4 consecutive points to reach set point herself. Momentum swung wildly, point after agonizing point, until the deciding moment arrived. Facing a set point on her own serve at 7-8, Eala won a pulsating 20-shot rally when Świątek finally netted a forehand. She had done it. She claimed the epic tiebreaker 11-9, and center court exploded. The second set told a different story entirely. Eala broke early, then broke again, racing to a commanding lead, while Świątek searched desperately for answers that never arrived. Eala closed out a superb 7-6-9, 6-2 victory, dropping to her knees on the grass, rolling onto her back in disbelief as the reality of what she'd just done began to sink in. Think about the magnitude of that moment for a second. This wasn't just beating a good player. This was ending the title defense of the reigning Wimbledon champion, a 6 Grand Slam winner, a former world #1 who had spent 125 weeks at the top of the sport. It was Eala's 7th career win against a top 10 opponent, and by every measure, the most significant result of her young career. Her words afterward, delivered on court with the Philippine flags waving all around her, carried the emotional weight of everything that had led to this moment. This goes out to them, this goes out to my family, this goes out to all the little girls with ruffled socks and chubby cheeks. It means the world, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. She spoke about the connection to her home country, saying simply, "It's incredible to have my countrymen cheering me on and knowing that we're all in this together." The curse that had once defined her, the Czech losses, the near misses, the questions about whether she could win the biggest matches, all of it felt suddenly, permanently rewritten. Birmingham had broken the pattern, Berlin had proven the pattern wasn't a fluke, and Wimbledon had just delivered the receipt. Here's what makes this story so compelling, so worth watching closely in the days ahead. Nothing about Eala's rise has followed the traditional script. She wasn't a can't-miss prodigy handed opportunities from day one. She was a player written off by the numbers, defined for years by a losing streak that felt permanent, forced to claw her way back into relevance one tournament at a time. Birmingham was where she finally silenced the whispers about the Czech curse. Berlin was where she proved she belonged among the elite, even in defeat. And Wimbledon is where she turned belief into undeniable historic fact. Every great underdog story eventually reaches a fork in the road, the moment where the world stops asking how far can she go and starts asking what happens if she actually wins it all. Alex Eala is standing at that fork right now, with a place in the quarterfinals of the most prestigious tournament in tennis on the line. Whatever happens against Paolini, one truth is already permanent. The player once defined by what she couldn't do has spent one unforgettable month redefining exactly what she can. So here's the question worth sitting with as her run continues. Was this simply one incredible month, or is Alex Eala about to become the next great name in women's tennis? Let us know what you think she does next, and if you believe her run is just getting started, hit subscribe so you don't miss a single moment of it.